The previous training was all about finding great talent and hiring them. But once you've done that and agreed a price with them, then what? In this training, we'll look at contracts, how to train team members and delegate tasks, how to actually manage and lead a team, what the workflow looks like, how to easily pay people internationally, checklists you can use to make everything easier, tools and systems you can use for each of the different roles within the business, and many other useful tips and strategies for working with team members successfully. Let's dive in. First up, contracts. Even though most people who end up working for your team will likely be freelancers, I would highly recommend still having a contract in place with them. This can be fairly simple, but it needs to lay out exactly what's expected of them, what they're getting in return, and what would happen if things don't go as planned. A contract usually helps prevent any disagreements later down the line, as you have a document you've both signed that clearly lays out both sides' responsibilities, and there's tools like DocuSign and PandaDoc to easily do this online. Basically, a contract allows you to reduce your own risks. For example, you could specifically state in a video editor's contract that they're not allowed to use copyrighted music. You could also state that people can't outsource the work, as there will be some people who say they're working for you directly, but then simply pass the work to someone else. Contracts are not something many creators think about early on, but not having one could turn out to be very costly. Without a contract, you're just assuming both of you are on the same page about everything, which you often won't be, so a contract makes everything more official and legally binding. Once both you and the freelancer have signed the contract, you can then complete the onboarding process by sending them any relevant information they need for the projects. Next up is training team members. The clearer instructions you can give to team members, the more likely you're going to get what you're hoping for. So create a document for each role. So for example, video editor, thumbnail designer, scriptwriter, and so on. And in that document, list out what style you want, helpful resources, and any other instructions about what you're aiming for. For example, with scriptwriters, I write out the exact format I want the script in, including the font, the sizing, the spacing, etc. And I specify that they should submit the work as a Google Doc so it's in the same format every time. Then when you start working with someone new, you can share this document with them. And that way you don't have to explain everything to every new person you work with. You can also have an FAQ section on the document, and whenever a team member asks you a question, you can add the question and answer at the bottom of the document. And don't forget to encourage team members to ask questions. Make sure they know you want them to always ask if they have any doubts or confusion about anything. This way, over time, the document just gets more and more useful, which means in future, people won't need to ask you questions because you've already answered them. The reason this is so useful is otherwise you'll be repeating yourself to different team members over and over. You also forget which information you've even told to certain team members. I learned this the hard way. With my first ever editor, we discussed so much together, but then by the time I got my second editor, I realized I was starting back at zero with us having discussed nothing. And if that first editor left, all that time I'd spent teaching them how I wanted things would essentially be lost. That's why a master document with all the key info and answers is such an incredible tool. However, a lot of training comes from them actually doing the work and then you giving them feedback. Make sure this is written constructively. Obviously don't just say, this part is bad. Explain what aspects you don't like and why, and what you'd have done differently. Likewise, comment on any aspects of their work that you really do like so they know to do more of it. The more you can repeat this feedback cycle, the better their work normally becomes. A lot of creators try to skip the feedback process, but if you do this at the start, it'll mean their work requires far less changes in the long run, which saves you a lot of time overall. Another pro tip for training people is to get someone to watch what you do and how you make decisions. Over time, they learn to see exactly how your brain works and become a mini version of you. This doesn't have to be done in person. You can literally screen record yourself doing tasks and talk through your thought process. Yes, this is time consuming at first, but it'll be way less time consuming in the long run as you won't have to do everything yourself. You'll create an army of mini yous who know how you think. And then those people can help train other people too. Now let's talk about how to manage a team. Messaging. You ideally want to get all your team on the same platform so all your messages are in one place. Otherwise it can get messy and hard to keep track. Obviously you can use email to communicate with everyone, but generally for faster back and forth communication, people will use either Slack, which is what businesses normally use and is best for building your own team space, or Discord or WhatsApp. If you just have a couple of team members, you can just use whatever is most convenient. But with a bigger team, you'll most likely want Slack so that other team members can talk to each other rather than all communication going through you or your channel manager. Milestones. When your team is working remotely, for longer projects, it's useful to have check-in points. For example, if a video editor is working on a video that's going to take 3 weeks to edit, rather than just sending them the project and then hoping in 3 weeks it all worked out well, you may agree that at the end of each week, they should send you an update with how it's going, and a preview of what they've done so far. Of course, you don't want to micromanage everything. You hired these people because they showed they could do good work. But it's definitely useful to have milestones within a project to check they're on the right lines. For example, if you don't do this, they may have used a color scheme you hate, but if you don't see it until the video is done, it's going to take a lot of time to fix that. Deadlines. I used to always tell team members there was no deadline, just focus on quality. But actually, deadlines can be really useful so you both have clear expectations. Parkinson's law states that work expands to fill the time given to complete it. Deadlines are one of the most powerful motivators and can help people get more done and faster. The key here is working with your team to agree deadlines together, so it's actually realistic and you're not compromising on quality. But realistic deadlines help keep everyone on track and focused, and make it much easier for you to plan your content schedule. Once you've worked with team members a couple of times, you'll both have a much better estimate of how long projects will take. Versions. With all team members, for every project, every piece of work they submit should have a version number. For example, when your video editor submits their first draft, the file name should have V1 in it for version 1. Then the next draft, once they've implemented your feedback, will be called V2, and so on. And it's the exact same process with thumbnails, audio editing, scripts, etc. Now, hopefully you won't need too many versions. If you do, that's a red flag that either the team member isn't working out or your instructions aren't clear enough. But this version numbering system will keep everything much more organized. It may sound obvious, but I did not do this at first. Nobody had told me about this. So I ended up having files with all different names and it being really confusing which were even the latest ones. I'd sometimes have multiple files with the word final in the name because I'd expected this would be the final file, but then for some reason there was an issue and it wasn't the final file. The version number system solves that. The higher the number, the more recent the version, so you can easily see which is the latest one and compare versions. And then you can say to team members things like, oh, I like this from V2, and they'll know exactly what you're referring to. Trust me, this will be helpful in many ways. Tracking multiple videos. As you can start to see, once you begin to have multiple team members, multiple videos being worked on at once, and multiple versions, it could easily get confusing. So you need a way to easily track what stage every video is at. Some people use Trello boards. I prefer Notion as it can be used for so many other things, so you create a database for your whole business. This allows you to easily see which videos are at what stage of production. Once the writer is done with a project, it'll get moved to the audio phase, which is recording voiceover. Once the audio phase is completed, it'll move to the video phase, which is editing the video. And this way, when you click on a project, you'll be able to see which team member is working on it, so it's always easy to track who the project is currently waiting on. You can configure the layout however makes sense for you. Just make sure you have a central hub where you can quickly see the progress of each video. YouTube channel access. Within settings on your YouTube Studio, you can actually add team members to your channel so they can work on your YouTube channel for you, but without you having to give them your login details, which you should never do. Of course, be very wary of adding anyone to your YouTube channel. You need to fully trust that person. Certainly don't give this permission to anyone brand new to your team. Most of the time, if you are adding a team member to your YouTube channel, it should only be as a viewer. This means they can see your analytics and YouTube Studio, but not actually edit or change anything. Occasionally though, there may be a need to give someone manager access so they can upload videos, edit video details, etc. For example, if you've hired someone to help you actually manage the channel on your behalf. Even then, be extremely careful about giving anyone manager access to your channel, and ensure you have a strict contract in place first about what they can or can't do. Also, ensure they add two-factor authentication to their account for extra security, because the more people who have manager access to your account, the more of a security risk it is. Leading a team. When team members do something really well, acknowledge that and give them encouragement. It's easy to give feedback when something is wrong, but remembering to give some praise when things go well helps make team members feel good and recognized, which helps retain them and often helps unlock extra effort. Firing. The good news is, if you're working with freelancers, you don't really have to fire someone. You just stop sending them projects and tell them you don't have anything for them right now. As for deciding whether to keep working together, obviously the quality of their work is going to be the biggest factor, but also consider what's important to you. For example, if they make a mistake, but I've never specifically told them not to do that, then that's actually on me for not fully explaining what I need. But if I tell them don't do this, and they still do it again, at that point we're just wasting time. You don't want to work with people where you're constantly repeating things. Another reason you may stop working with someone is if they're always bad with communication. Now, of course, everyone has genuine issues that come up in their personal life, and so I'm not suggesting if someone is slow to reply occasionally, that's immediately a fireable offense. But if people end up submitting work past the deadlines, not checking in when they said they would, and are just generally slow to respond, those are all red flags. It's important to maintain high standards on a team, as poor team members can drag everyone else down. Paying people abroad. I'm going to save you so much time right now. You need to register for a service called Wise, and I'll link to that underneath this video training. Wise allows you to send and receive money in many different currencies. You can also hold money in your account and earn interest, and you can send payment requests. It is the best platform by far in my experience for managing payments. It also has a great feature where you can get a virtual debit card that can be easily cancelled, so if you're paying for products or services you're slightly unsure about, this will give you extra protection as it can easily be frozen or cancelled and a new card generated. You can even set up cards for your team members to use if needed, and set a budget of how much they can spend. I cannot stress enough how useful this service has been. The most useful aspect of all, though, is simply the ability to send money from your local currency to the local currency of your team members in other countries. For example, I can convert UK pounds to Indian rupees to pay someone in India, and the money will go straight to their local bank account. The fees are lower than competitors, and transactions are fast. So whenever you hire someone from another country and face the question of how to pay them, this is the answer. Remember though, before you pay someone, make sure they send you an invoice, which is just a document that specifies the amount, what the payment is for, and who to send the payment to. Then save this for your records. Also, once you've paid someone, make a note of that on their page in Notion so you can keep track of which work you've paid for. Now though, let's talk about each of the main roles within your business you may hire for, and some specific instructions, tools, and checklists you can use for each. First up, scriptwriters. The main tool you're going to use here is Google Docs. You don't want some people submitting Word documents, some submitting PDFs, it just gets confusing when things aren't standardized. Google Docs is completely free and has many benefits. You can easily share the script documents with whoever you need to, you can see the version history and how it's changed over time, multiple people can work on the document at once, and it's synced to the cloud so the file isn't saved on a single device and is always available. When a writer submits you a Google script, you'll then be able to add comments to the script which will appear on the side. This is a very effective way of giving your feedback and revisions. My writer job ad and writer guidelines. Here is a gift for you, the exact page I used when hiring a scriptwriter, including really detailed instructions for writers on how to actually write compelling scripts. I can't overstate how useful this will be. It was a lot of work to put this together, but you can just take whatever you need from it. In the script writing instruction section, you'll see I've distilled down the 10 most important elements of a Magnates Media script, but most of these principles will apply for any script. You can turn those points into a checklist for your writers. I'm a huge fan of checklists as it ensures nothing gets missed and makes the process easily repeatable. So here's a basic example checklist for a scriptwriter to run through at the end of their first version of a script, and you can share this with your writers and add in the things you want to add in. Script is fully fact-checked, all the key info has been added, and especially try to find anything really interesting, surprising, fascinating, dramatic, or controversial. Make the script easier to follow, so ask yourself, does the script fully make sense? Is it clear to follow and does it flow well and easy to understand all the points? I always like to think, could a 16-year-old who isn't a native English speaker still understand this? Because remember, it should be easy to follow for a mass audience, so it's best to simplify anything where you need to reread it multiple times to understand. The next checklist point is make it more entertaining and dramatic. What parts feel like dull work to read, and how could they be reworded differently, or shortened, or cut out completely? Also, is there enough focus on the drama and conflict and exciting elements? How can we add more action, emotion, and excitement to the content? Make sure it doesn't sound like a Wikipedia article. The who cares test. If you read several sentences in a row where the average viewer would hear it and think, who cares? It's probably not needed or should be improved. Correct formatting's applied. Obviously, you can decide what formatting you want, but then ensure every script follows the same format and style and structure for consistency. And change the Google Docs share settings to anyone with the link can view. It's useful to have this on the checklist, or else you'll get sent links where you don't have access. So that's just a basic checklist you could give to the writers, so it kind of reminds them to do these important things at the end of their first version. Even though you will have told them this stuff already, or it'll be in your main document that you give to team members, by having it as a checklist, it forces them to go through each point one by one and try and make these improvements if needed. Giving revisions to writers. Once a writer submits version 1 of a script to you, you'll then want to give them feedback on what they can improve. But there are two levels of feedback. There's micro feedback, which is really detailed line-by-line comments, like reword this specific sentence. But there's also macro feedback, which is the overall comments about the script and applying the general principles. For example, you might say, we need to make this whole chapter easier to understand. Of course, there's always some subjectivity to writing, but I do believe if we're making things more emotion-driven, so people empathize with what the character was going through and can imagine exactly what they were experiencing, more dramatic and exciting, like saying things in the most engaging way, while still being based on the facts of what happened, and cutting out any unnecessary, boring filler, clearer and more straightforward, so everyone can easily understand and follow, and connected, so one point leads to the next, rather than being a series of disconnected points. If we can do those things, then that objectively will make it better. Because although some aspects of writing are subjective, those things I just said are pretty much objective. If you can do them, it will make the script better. Okay, what about video editors? Let's start with the main tools. I recommend your video editors use Adobe Creative Cloud Suite. Primarily Adobe Premiere and After Effects will be used for video editing, and Adobe Audition for audio editing. I strongly recommend all your editors use the same software in case one editor needs to share the project with you or another editor. Another useful tool is Frame.io, which is a tool that makes the revision process easier, as your editors can upload each version of the video they create, and then you can add your comments at each specific timestamp. Frame.io allows you to draw on the video too, like circling a certain part of the screen to refer to a specific part you want changing. However, a more basic but still effective way of doing revisions is simply to use a Google Doc and write out the revisions in a list. So for example, you could write at 0034, make the text bigger. There are times I still do this simple method with editors, and using a Google Doc to give revisions can work just as well. The other tool I use with editors is Google Drive for sharing files. You can create a shared drive folder for each editor where they can upload all their files in one place. And you simply ask them to create a new folder for each video to keep everything organized. Next up, I want to share with you the revisions checklist. And basically, this is just some examples of things to check for when you receive a video file. And of course, you can add things to this checklist that are important to you that you want to remind yourself to check for every time. So for example, are there any glitches or export issues? Are there any spelling mistakes? Check every single word carefully. Check for any factual errors or mistakes where the wrong thing's been shown. Are the right people shown in the photos? Check the background details for any issues or mistakes. Are there any points where the music gets too loud or too quiet? Which songs need to change and when? Which parts of the video are too boring and could be made more interesting? And then it suggests some more creative things to show instead. So when you receive version 1 of a video, these are all the kind of things you can be thinking about. And by having a checklist, it prompts you and reminds you what things to look for. Now, you need to watch the video multiple times, focusing on different things each time, as it's really hard to judge everything all at once. So, when you're writing revisions for an editor, it's always good to watch a few times, judging different elements each time. Like on one watch, you'll just focus for mistakes and errors. Then on another watch of the video, you'll just focus on music levels and song changes. And maybe another watch for just creative improvements. Yes, obviously this takes more time because you have to watch the video several times, but it makes the video much better and ensures nothing gets missed. Honestly, this tip was really helpful for me because I often found it overwhelming trying to do all the revisions at once, but when you segment it like this and just focus on one thing at a time, it allows you to pick up on things much easier. As always, you can use this checklist I've given you as a starting point, but then just customize it to suit your needs based on the things you want to look for when you're doing revisions. And just like we said with the writers, remember to think in terms of both micro and macro changes. So micro changes might be like, change the color of this specific text or make this clip brighter. Whereas macro changes are going to be things like, this whole scene needs to be changed and visualized differently. So for example, sometimes I may say something like, instead of a movie clip at 425, let's have an animation of X, or use icons and graphics to represent what's being said instead. So you don't have to spell everything out for the editor, but try to always give them something actionable. So don't just say, change this, but then with no explanation of what to change it to, as that's more likely to result in more revisions. The more you can point them in the right direction, the better. Another example of a revision I've sent was that initially in the Game of YouTube video, the spacing was off for these icons, and the text was too blurry and not bold enough. Given these were on screen a lot and didn't look very professional, I felt it was important to flag this. And like I said before, I'll always do a watch through of the video where I specifically think about the music and whether it fits well, or if there are some songs that go on too long and need changing. But here's an important lesson I've learned when it comes to revisions. Prioritize revisions that affect watch time. Changes like a slightly better photo or slightly higher quality are nice, but generally they aren't going to make a lot of difference to how long someone watches the video. But here are examples of things that might make someone click off the video. A sequence of 20 seconds of super dull stock footage that makes you bored, or parts where the clip or image is wrong and hurts the credibility of the video, or an effect that's annoying to watch, like too much flashing, or music that doesn't fit well and ruins the mood, or a song that's too loud and makes the voiceover hard to hear. So it's really useful to consider the impact on watch time when thinking about what to change or improve, as those are the most important changes. So those should be the priority over more subjective and minor changes. Okay, so as you've gathered by now, I am a big fan of checklists, and I also have an editor checklist which I send to my editors for them at the end of every video, and you can share this with your editors too. So once the revisions are done, here's what I ask them. Please go through every bit of text and check each word individually to make sure there's no spelling mistakes, typos, or grammar issues. Check the audio levels are balanced, music not too loud or too quiet. Export the final video in high quality, and then I give the specific requirements for my particular video. Please also separate the audio elements onto different tracks and export uncompressed .wav files. This one is something you may not need to do for your videos, but I just find it useful to have the separate audio tracks so I can make changes myself if needed. Next up is watch through everything one final time to check there's no glitches or issues in the video, then upload to Google Drive and share the file with me. And finally, if any additional licenses are needed in any of the assets, please send those too. Thank you. Once again, this is just a template with some ideas. You can customize it with your own criteria. The point is that by having an end checklist, it ensures consistency with every editor on every project, and so nothing gets forgotten. The more you can systemize things into repeatable checklists, the more efficient the process gets for everyone. If I constantly had to remind people to check for spelling mistakes, I'd forget sometimes, or they'd forget. But by having it as a checklist, it's just an easy thing they tick off at the end of every video so we know it's been done. But now let's talk about the manager or operator. The hardest position to hire for, but the one with the most upside, is a channel manager, chief operating officer, whatever you want to call them. That's because they can essentially take on a lot of the work you would otherwise be doing. Here's what their main objectives may look like, and it may not be all of these things, but this is a good starting point. Number 1, take things off your plate. When random jobs come up, they should handle or delegate them so you don't have to. Number 2, manage and lead the team. Be the connecting point between you and the rest of the team, like answering their questions and passing on relevant info to you. This also means being a leader and motivating the team, like providing constructive feedback and praise to the team. Number 3 is to expand the team. Find talent needed to grow the business and hire and onboard new team members. Number 4 is sponsors. Find and negotiate new sponsorships and work with brands to complete the brand deals. For example, dealing with the back and forth negotiations, contracts, etc. Number 5, increase revenue, primarily achieved through increasing content production, closing new and higher brand deals, and suggesting additional ways the business can make more money. Number 6, increase efficiency, productivity, and organization within the business. This includes tracking important metrics and putting forward ideas and solutions to improve. And number 7, protect the business. Take steps to mitigate risk and suggest ideas and improvements. In other words, they're taking on lots of the work you would normally be doing and a lot of the business side of operations. This is a role where you would need to train someone a lot first so they understand exactly what you want. So this can be a case where they shadow you for a while and see how you handle everything. But it's certainly worth putting the time in to do this if you want a more automated channel, as imagine how much time you would save. This is how you achieve a more traditional hierarchy where instead of all the team members reporting to you, they report to the channel manager who reports to you. So instead of you messaging 10 different freelancers, you only have one person to work with. They can hopefully deal with all the day-to-day issues and questions from the team and get them fixed before they reach you. If you're still relatively new in your YouTube journey, I wouldn't worry about this role yet. Learn how to run things well yourself first. But further down the line, hiring this role is what allows you to act more like the CEO and actually focus on the bigger picture vision. And if you've trained the channel manager well and put proper checklists in place, there's no reason they can't be handling most of the list we just talked about. However, it is highly likely to find someone great for this role, you'd need to offer them some kind of profit sharing agreement so the incentives are fully aligned, and they have unlimited upside for growing the channel, and thus they're more likely to give their all and go above and beyond. For example, you may offer them 10 to 20% of the channel's profits, so they're incentivized for the channel to be as profitable as possible. Okay, hopefully by now you can see how useful having a team will be, freeing up your time to work on the most important tasks. Of course, a team is not built overnight. It'll maybe just be one freelancer to start, but then you add another and another until suddenly you have a whole team working on your business around the clock. It's quite a satisfying thought to know that even while you're sleeping, you have team members around the world still working on making great content. It'll take work up front, but if you use these strategies we've talked about, I assure you it'll be worth it.